Welcome back to the John Frederick Show, Common Sense for the Commonwealth. We're broadcasting from the nation's capital, Common Sense News Time 812. With us now, victorious, yes, the victor of our debate we had earlier, Grover Norquist. He's the president of Americans for Tax Reform, ATR.org. Grover, great to have you with us. You won because in the Senate in Virginia, Governor McDonald's transportation plan, which called for an increase in taxes to the sales tax, got the heave-ho, and that is dead now on arrival. And we had a debate on that. And, Grover, you won fair and square.
Well, the taxpayers won. The taxpayers of Virginia won a fight, and now we need to go back and figure out how to get real resources to transportation by prioritizing it, by putting transportation first when the state makes allocations. Instead, as the Democrats in the Senate, the Democrats in the House, and one or two Republicans in the Senate, they put transportation dead last, and they said they'd only repair the roads and build more roads if they got tax increases, because everything else the government did was too important, and roads were last in their mind. Let's go in this next election and elect a House and a Senate majority that are committed to putting transportation as a key priority for Virginia, and certainly not putting transportation last and taxpayers laster.
Well, no question. I mean, this doesn't do anything to solve the transportation crisis we have in Virginia, and so now we've got to go back to square one. There is, however, and we've been talking about this all day, there's a candidate running for lieutenant governor, businessman and entrepreneur, Pete Snyder. He's called for an across-the-board or a overall 10% cut in government spending in Virginia, just 10% total. It doesn't know exactly where it's going to come out of, but he says cut it by 10%, take that 10%, lockbox it for transportation. What do you think of that?
Well, something like that moves in the right direction. One of the things that McDonald was trying to do, the governor was trying to do, was to say when there's additional revenue coming in a surplus, and there's been over $1 billion in surplus over the last 3 years, the legislature spent less than 1% of that on roads, okay? So if you can't prioritize, unexpected revenue because the economy grew faster than you were planning, when can you begin to prioritize roads? Certainly, I think it's important to begin to say when additional revenue comes in, it should all go to roads, and that's exactly what the governor had to fight against for the last 3 years. I understand his frustration. He was trying to get the money from selling off the government-run liquor stores, for crying out loud, like this was Bulgaria in 1964. What's going on, government-run liquor stores? It's silly. Sell them.
Sorry, Grover.
I'm sorry, Grover.
Bulgaria in 1960.
That was the line of the day. That was
we got to get that
Grover.
Yeah. Bulgaria 1964 is it's like in East Berlin.
It is. Look, civilized countries don't run liquor stores. They don't run steel mills, okay? Obviously, if you're too busy selling liquor, you can't have any time to build roads, for crying out loud. How about deciding what's important for the government to do and what the government should get out of, because it takes time, money, and bandwidth that the government doesn't have. So, one, apparently, because you never, like, what is it, Carrie, the movie, these things have a way of coming back. So we think this tax increase is gone away. And now let's move back to prioritizing spending. What the governor tried to do for 3 years and then in frustration said, well, the only way to get this done is a tax increase. Maybe we'll do that. What the governor should have understood is the Democrats in the Senate and the Democrats in the House want a tax increase. They don't want to spend the money on roads. They've spent the last 30 years not putting the money into roads. Why do we think they have some secret desire to do that, which they've never done? When they get money, they spend it on other things. Mark Twain used to say, why do people believe that when they go to heaven, they'll have eternal bliss playing the harp? Nobody plays the harp here when they could, right? I mean, if it was so much fun, why don't people do it here? They don't. They imagine that later they'll do it. Democrats imagine someday if they had money, they'd build roads. They don't do it, not while they're alive. but they imagine in heaven that's how they'd spend all their tax revenue.
Of course, in Bulgaria in 1960, they played the harp, which was a whole different thing, but that's another story.
Yes.
Okay,
that may
well,
be the problem.
Common Sense News Time, 8:17. This is the John Frederick Show. We're with the president of Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist. Grover, just the other day, just Sunday in the New York Times, Karl Rove, that government expansionist, he's targeting Tea Party-type conservatives, saying that they're the problem. Is Grover Norquist now in Karl Rove's crosshairs?
I hope not, and I think that Karl and some of the guys around him misspoke. What I think they're trying to do, and I've talked to a couple of them, is that if you look at what happened in the last several elections, it's not that the Tea Party picked candidates that couldn't win. It was that the Democratic opponent, Aiken, the candidate who had said so many things he could never win statewide. It wasn't the most recent thing he said in his campaign that sank him. He'd said things like that before. But he won because the Democrat incumbent ran ads that highlighted him rather than the other two perfectly fine Reagan Republicans, who, in fact, the Tea Party-type outside groups were split between those two candidates. I like both of them. Aiken was a pleasant enough fellow, but not somebody who could run statewide and was a flawed candidate. The Democrats spent millions of dollars and helped get that Aiken nominated as a third person running. Same thing happened with Sharon Angle in Nevada, where Harry Reid could have been facing Sue Loudon, who would have crushed him like a bug.
Yes.
And there it is true. Club for Growth supported Angle. Big mistake. I have no idea. They had no intelligence on the ground if they were making that decision. But more than the Club for Growth's bad judgment there, and I think one of the Tea Party groups may have jumped in thinking she was the conservative candidate, and Sue Loudon was every bit as conservative, perhaps stronger Reagan Republican than Angle. But Harry Reid spent millions sinking Loudon, supporting Angle. So what I'm more concerned about, and I hope that Karl Rove and his group focus on, is when the Democrats play in Republican primaries how do we pick these idiots? We don't pick those idiots. The Democrat candidate and the Democrat Party are out there helping to select the most outrageous one, and they do it by attacking the person who can never win as if they were Ronald Reagan. And then low-information Republican primary people go, oh, well, if the Democrats really hate this candidate, they must be the best.
But, candidate. Grover, wouldn't you say that the Democrats certainly have that right? Why don't Republicans turn the tables on them and do the same thing and try to get left-wing whack jobs?
Unfortunately, that's all the other team runs. But ones that are easily identifiable as left-wing whack jobs, there's one, I think that would be turnabout's fair play. I hope that that's what Karl and folks are thinking of doing, not just playing defense, but also offense. There is one difference, and that is you did not see the New York Times or CBS jump into the Missouri race and say, oh, my goodness, look at how the Democrats are supporting Aiken because they think he's no good, and do an expose on what they were doing. If that had happened, Republican primary voters would have gone, wait a minute, I'm not going to be fooled. But CBS does that favor to the modern Democratic Party. They do not do that to the Republican Party.
All right, Grover, I know you have to run, but one quick question for you before we go. We will have ATR's Matty Dupler on Monday to talk about the budget and sequestration. Have you got a preview of what type of solutions we may see, if any, coming up early next week?
Oh, absolutely. Matty's great and is a real expert on all these issues. Mm-hmm. What sequestration is an automatic spending cut. It is the flip side of the automatic tax increase that took place on January 1st of this year. There was a $500 billion tax hike. The Bush tax cuts disappeared, lapsed, unless Congress acted, okay? And we were able to get 85% of that money off the table permanently for 99% of Americans, which is not bad work for government work, but not 100%. Very disappointing. We couldn't do better. This time around, the tables turned. Unless we pass a law, we are going to save money across the board. So this time, the advocates of lower spending, less government, limited government are in the catbird seat. We have the four aces. And you see Obama flailing around saying, hey, guys, instead of having real budget cuts, why don't we have imaginary temporary budget cuts and tax increases? And the Republicans are looking at them going, no, why don't we not? So we're going to have sequester. The Republicans will offer several alternatives to the sequester that save as much money as the sequester, would be less weighted on Pentagon spending than the way the sequester is structured, and we'd be open to the Democrats putting out a 10-year spending restraint plan that is as serious about spending restraint, as real as what the sequester does. I'm not holding my breath because I don't. Wherever Obama and Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi went to grade school, they learned addition and never learned subtraction. Oh. So when you ask them to spend less next year, they just look at you like you'd ask them to speak Chinese.
Well, you never know
what you're talking about.
I think Nancy may have taken some Mandarin on the side. You never know. Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Reforms, you've hit it out of the park once again with your great insight. We appreciate it, and as always, travel safe. I know you're out and about this week making your case, and we thank you again for the time, okay?
Absolutely. I'm out in Oklahoma where they're cutting the income tax.
Well, there you go. You got to love that. You must be in pig heaven, to put it mildly.
Absolutely.
All right,
you're not in Bulgaria, and it's not 1964. That's the good news.
Exactly, but he is playing the harp. So we got all of the kicker
Grover
lines.
Norquist playing the harp. That's
exactly.
an image you got to get.
All right, Grover, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Coming up now on 8:24 here, Common Sense Time on the John Frederick Show. Back in a short 90 seconds with more.